Power of Inspirational Design session for the LEAP 2020 virtual conference powered by the advisors at Mahdlo. I'm Michelle Oldham, and today I'm joined by Adam Roatmill, Product Discovery and Design Lead from AstraZeneca, Kim Marchant, VP of Design Operations for JP Morgan Chase, Amanda Stockwell, author of UX courses for LinkedIn and founder of Stockwell Strategy, and Shamala Prayaga from Ford Motor Company, where she leads the autonomous vehicle digital assistance efforts, otherwise known as voice interaction design. Thank you all for joining. It is so wonderful to have you.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Of course, of course. All right, so as you guys know, our conference this year is themed by all things inspiration. So I'm going to kick off by asking you about inspirational design and what specifically inspires each of you to drive meaningful growth through your work and through design. Amanda, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts?
Sure. So I am in the lucky position that I'm a consultant. I get to work with a lot of different kinds of groups, a lot of different kinds of organizations. And what really inspires me is watching the teams that I work with grow and really come to value user experience and to see how much they can change their own work, the overall value of the company in some cases, and really kind of drive growth and change in their organizations. So I really love working with different teams at different companies. And I tend to work with people who are newer to user experience and helping them kind of build their habits, build their practices, and see how much change it can have over time. And so, although it means that I sometimes work myself out of a job with them, I absolutely love watching teams grow and kind of helping people kind of grow to understand and get to a place where UX is an integral part of their process.
Wonderful, wonderful. Adam, how about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, so I've always felt that design, it's sort of like you're designing a thing for a company or some users, but it's also like you're designing the world you want to live in. So that's partly why I felt, passionate about it. I think it's just piece by piece. Designers are authorial, and we're creating that world. And right now, I'm working on something for cancer patients and oncologists and caregivers, and so that's like the key performance indicators for that are like more people live longer. So it's awesome. I mean, it gets you out of bed in the morning, and I feel like UX is great, but UX is like a means to change the world.
That's right. That's right. Oh, that's great, Adam. Definitely. Kim, what are your thoughts?
Gosh, yes. I mean, I think throughout my career, I've generally been inspired by the same thing, which is why I still work in the same line of work, which is being part of a team, being part of a team of designers particularly, but all sharing, and this is generally because I worked in-house actually for one particular brand, shared goals, right? You're all in it together, hopefully you're all clear on where you want to get to, and that is the thing that kind of gets me up in the morning and gets me motivated and helps me motivate the teams I work with, because we are all driving hopefully towards the same thing, and that can, I think, done in the right way, shared in the right way, and worked on things together can really help to inspire you to get further and do more,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Shamala, how about you? I'm sure you have an interesting perspective given your line of work.
Yeah, so I would say, collaboration inspires me a lot. Like everyone else said, at some degree, collaboration is, like when you collaborate with developers, designers, and everyone is speaking the same language and they will understand the common shared goals of, what we want from the users and, their expectations and all of those things. When everyone does that and, we are able to collaborate, communicate, share ideas, understand the constraints and be creative about those constraints and design solutions, I feel like, that is what inspires me a lot. And I see that challenge day in and day out. And I feel that is what, makes this profession so different, that every day is so different. It's not the same thing.
So. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think that's a really good point. It keeps it interesting, right? So that in itself is inspiring. All right.
And I would love to add to that actually, because just thinking about that concept, which particularly working with design, we have such a broad range of skill sets within the team. And so everyone is bringing a different perspective, even though, as I said, it's often, past the shared goal, but we've got user experience, visual design, service design, creative technologists. And so everyone's bringing a different perspective, which just makes it just a really interesting experience every single time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, so here's another question for you all. What does transparent design or an open creative process mean to you? There's been a lot of discussion around that recently. What are your thoughts on this? Shamala, how about you?
So, see, transparent design for me is where everyone understands, what we are working on. So for example, I have been part of some projects where developers are not included till the end, and they'll come in very late, wherein you design everything, then hand off the specifications, and they don't understand the goals, the users, or anything as such, and they've been struggling now to, design it. On the other side, I've also had experiences where right from research, I have included developers like, hey, come on in, let's do this co-creation together. And they've been part of the co-creation workshops, or they've been part of, usability testings and all. And the mindset is completely different when we do something like that. So what I feel is, like throughout, if we all know the feature, we all know, what we are working on, everyone understands their roles, but also is able to, collaborate and work with others. For example, I work very closely with developers, even to understand the technical limitations right from the beginning before I propose, instead of just designing something and giving and saying like, this is the, moonshot vision. And they're like, this is technically not possible, right? So I feel like all of these things like communication or collaboration or involving every stakeholder right from the beginning is transparent design for me.
Awesome. Amanda, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I sometimes have a particular challenge with this because very frequently I get brought in by one particular group. And a huge part of my job actually within a team is to build that transparency, right? It's to come in and say, okay, marketing team, I know you're the ones who hired me, but actually the support team and the dev team and the product team and the research team and the design team and probably some other teams I'm forgetting all need to know about this work that we're doing. And we all need to be aligned. And people say with all kinds of different jobs that the technical skills are not always the hardest, that it's usually the people. And I think that's especially true in research and design. And so I really make it a point to build relationships with different people across, no matter who hired me, to build relationships. And I sometimes it's a challenge, but sometimes it's an advantage that I can kind of lend an outside perspective. Sometimes I have the opportunity to say things to people that maybe the teams who've hired me can't really say based on politics or just the way things are kind of set up. But so that's actually another one of the pieces that I really love about getting to work with lots of different teams is a lot of times I get brought in to be that connector. And, Michelle has seen me at a party. I can't really help it. I do that anyway. So it works out quite nicely for me. But for me also, one of the other kind of important things is that transparency doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has to be involved. And I get a lot of pushback sometimes that people are like, well, I'm a developer, I should be coding. And I'm like, yo, you're right. That's fair. And I'm not trying to make you do my job. I'm trying to make your job easier. I'm trying to include us all the way along. And so a lot of the conversations that I have around transparent design is sort of bringing in the right people at the right times and giving them information that they can work with without, sort of disrupting workflows or kind of finding the right balance of asking who to do what and who to invest time in certain things. So it's a tricky balance for sure, but it's another one of my kind of favorite things about being in this kind of a role is getting to connect different pieces together across organizations.
Yeah, definitely. Building relationships for sure, very critical. And I love what you said, Amanda, about bringing people in at the right time. That's really very important versus waiting until the very end. So, Adam, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the co-creation piece to me has been one of the best things that's changed, I think, about the design profession from, at least what I remember. let's say 20 years ago as a graphic designer, it was all about kind of like you'd have one meeting with a client, then you'd go off and come up with a bunch of ideas and iterate on stuff, and then you'd bring it back and hopefully they wouldn't reject it. And sometimes they would. And it was like always this big, suspenseful thing. But now you just involve them in the process throughout, and you involve users and all these other folks if they can come. And then they all have a shared psychological investment in it, and they've all felt like they've created it together. So you don't have to like sell it at the end. It's more like you're celebrating, like, yeah, we got it across the finish line. Let's keep going. So I think that's really awesome. And I also think, just in terms of transparency, I think a lot of really great companies are openly writing about their design process, podcasting about it, blogging, and they're making assets available. Like, here's our design system that we spent 2 years making. You can have it. Here's how we did it. Whatever. And like Figma has this community area now where you can search for all kinds of stuff and download it. It's available for everyone. I just think that's really cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, I totally agree, Adam. Definitely in the spirit of being transparent. That's a great example. Kim, what are your thoughts?
Gosh, so many thoughts. And it's been really interesting actually to come in at the end of this, because I'm just listening to everything that you've just said, all of you. And it reminds me how much things have changed since, so you said, 20 years ago, you kind of waterfall approaches even to design in a sense of like, speak to the client, get the requirements, go off and do the work and then present it back. That has changed so much. And as part of my role as design ops at JP Morgan, but also in previous roles as well, it is about we're at the forefront there of like connecting and surfacing information. But really, Amanda, you touched on that as well, which is that doesn't mean that everybody needs to know everything and be involved in everything. So it's also being really strategic and bringing people in at the right time. And it's a very delicate balance. But the key thing is, as you've said, thinking about what can you share, what can be out there and open. So can your toolkit, I mean, when I was at Sainsbury's, I was heading up their design operations team, and we released our toolkit to anyone that wanted to learn from it, and I think that kind of transparency is fantastic, because that really kind of elevates this concept of learning from each other, even if you are in different businesses, right? We've all got learnings to share with each other and from each other, I think.
Absolutely. And Kim, this kind of feeds into our next question. And, I know you're VP of Design Operations for JP Morgan Chase, obviously. So one of the questions that actually has come in from our viewers is, what is the importance of design operations, and how has it evolved in particular?
Okay, well, I'm going to be very biased, aren't I, when I say, of course, it's incredibly important. But interestingly, it's talked about, I think, now as an emerging practice, but I think that's more about, it's been around, I've been doing it for years, but it's perhaps in that sense, it's because it's newly understood, right? And it's moved. If I think about what I was doing years ago, it was coming back to what I said before about, gathering requirements, briefing designers, organizing pipeline of work and resourcing. And there's all of that kind of daily kind of management of running the team, which is absolutely the bread and butter of design operations to make sure we're running smoothly. But the evolution, and this is the bit where I find really fascinating and really keeps me inspired in my role, is now that more of the kind of business transformation element. How are we going to help transform the business, whether it's thinking about client centricity or human-centered design? How do we actually instill processes outside of our immediate design team and actually connect with other areas of the business to really embed? And then you get to obviously the conversation about design maturity within organizations as well, and also thinking about how we measure our success. How do we measure what good looks like, and how do we track that, and what data can we collect from a central design ops point of view to actually showcase and surface that impact that we're having? So it's, I could talk about it for hours, to be honest.
Of course. No, I think that's great. It's a critical piece that I think that a lot of people often either don't understand, or it's not as valued as it should be. So, yeah. Amanda, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, so another sort of piece of design operations that I often get involved in is the hiring part, the building the teams, and what should your team structure look like, and how do you hire them, and how do you do that in a way that means that you're not just hiring the 5 people that you worked with your last company or the 5 people who look just like you. And so I have really loved watching the evolution of teams paying much more attention, first of all, to and I think that, kind of several of us have referenced, like when we first started out, it was sort of a make sure there's a UX person or a designer. And then it's become, okay, great. Maybe now we have a team. Maybe we should hire some different kinds of designers or different kinds of UXers. And now it's sort of about like operationalizing and sort of making sure that there's sort of an appropriate balance, and that's different for every team and for every organization, and what that looks like can be a little bit different. But I spent an awful lot of time hiring teams, hiring people, reviewing individual people, helping them get hired. But also, I've spent a lot of time in the last couple of years helping teams kind of build up their processes for hiring. And what does it look like to hire a UX person or a designer? What sort of skills might you need based on what you're looking for? And so I think that there's been a ton of evolution there and change. I think there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of diversity. And I think that I'm really happy that that's something people are starting to pay more attention to, but I don't think that it's something that we have like solved well as an industry or as anywhere in the world. I don't know anywhere that solved it really well, but it makes me happy that at least it's a conversation now, and it's something that people seem to be paying attention to. And so I very much am sort of interested in that evolution, and hoping that I can do what I can at various clients that I work with to kind of help build that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. That's great. That's great. Shamla, what are your thoughts?
So the moment, there are a lot of designers working in a company, we need to maintain consistency. We need to maintain, some sort of standards. It becomes so important. For example, when I used to work for Amazon, there were like almost 10,000 plus UX designers. Now, every designer thinks differently. Even if you talk about visual designers, researcher, everyone thinks so differently. And because they try to bring experience from, their previous jobs, and they try to, apply those things. So how do you maintain consistency? If you look at Amazon, or if you look at Ford, or if you look at any website, it doesn't look like, multiple designers have worked in it, but it feels like one person has worked, because that is a very good example of, operationalizing things, right? Like they have created style guides, or they created design patterns for the designers to consume, so that, okay, if you have to pick a like list, this is how it has to look. Even the copy, like you have UX writers and there's a style guide, so it's a way to say like this is how the choice of words or tone of voice should be. And I do that pretty much even for the voice interaction design as well. Like even if you look at voice applications, there are so many different like conversational designers who'll be working on it. Now, how do you ensure that like all of them resonate the brand and the personality as well? So I feel like it becomes really important to create standards and operations around these things, for sure, like the design patterns or the styles and stuff like that, so that it doesn't go all over the place. So we used to have some sort of standards when I used to work for Amazon, where there were like gatekeepers, and you can submit a pattern saying I need this kind of pattern for this reason, and this might help other designers as well. So you cannot just add any design you saw on Google and say like, hey, this is how it has to look. So that was one thing. And I second what Amanda said, like recruiting, of course, you need to also make sure that you're recruiting the right kind of people, not the only kind of person who you think like. So you need to also make sure that you have different diversity and diversified mindsets and people from different backgrounds, because they will bring in some things which maybe like one person will not be able to. So again, going back to the team and what kind of team you build up is also part of the standards and operations. So
yeah, definitely great points. Adam, what are your thoughts on design operations?
Yeah, I mean, I think so much of design is about creating the right conditions for design to be able to happen. And a lot of that is about relationships. You know, one of the things that I do anytime I join a company is I start literally scheduling coffee with all these kinds of people, like everybody. And people usually wonder, like, what are you doing? Like, would you rather be chatting or would you rather be getting stuff done? But then they see later, it's like, oh, you have relationships with 100 people. And every time you walk into a room, they're like, hey, I know you. Like, you know, you told me about your kids or, you know, whatever, like where you went on your honeymoon. And then later I'm like, hey, you know, I need to collaborate with you on this thing, or I'm trying to do something with somebody else. And it'd be really awesome if, you know, and they're just so much more open to it. I think, you know, more and more people start doing that. I think, you know, cubicle culture, COVID notwithstanding, you know, cubicle culture is gone. And I think, you know, that's just a great thing that's happening now at our companies.
Awesome.
Aside from that, I think, you know, having the time that you need to do the work, having time set aside for research, having the right size team. I will say one of my sort of like pet peeves is I think a little bit of mythology that got created in Silicon Valley about kind of the lean team, the agile ninja team, where people think like, oh yeah, you know, I read about this. You just have 3 people and put them in a room and then like blammo, you know, instant product. And I think that's not really true. I mean, you may have 3 people working on one little part of it, but you do need, it's a real thing. You need like a lot of people involved in order to have, if you want to be like Spotify or Google or whatever, you do need a lot of people involved.
Interesting. Interesting. I love what you said about relationships too. That's been a common theme out of all of the answers here. And as we all know, I mean, relationships are like currency, right? I mean, people love doing business with people they like, and so you build relationships in order to get that buy-in. So, all right.
And
So oh yeah, go ahead, Kim.
I was going to say, I know I'd love to add to that as well in terms of thinking about when we think about design ops and organizational design as well, thinking about, you know, those relationships are built up through long periods of time sometimes as well. So sustained teams, right? Long-lived teams, people that are working in a pod or a group together for a long time. And that's another thing that really takes some kind of planning and organization on a design ops side as well. But then also thinking about, has that person been on that project now for too long? Do they need to move and rotate? And then if you move that, but so it's a constant juggle really to make sure that people are feeling motivated, inspired, but also you've got to get them to a point where they understand their product. People are understanding each other as well, particularly when you're coming from different angles. So just the relationship piece is absolutely key, but helping to organize that and make that happen is also super important.
Yeah, absolutely. Great thoughts. Great thoughts. All right. We have one other question that just came in. And I think Amanda, you touched on this a little bit too, diversity of thought and diversity of community. So the question is, how do you incorporate diversity and inclusion into your design teams and work? Adam, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously hiring a diverse range of candidates, you know, but I think we'll talk more about that. But also I would like to talk about research. You know, if you find yourself in your research talking to like a narrow set of people, that's not going to be very good for your product. And even if you can't do it yourself, or if you don't have to, you can hire a third-party professional research firm, and it would be worth it, because you can say to them, hey, like we need, and the thing is with diversity in research, you need a cross-section of the entire planet, but it may be, so you may want to prioritize, like we need to include participants living in the UK for this, and that's super important. So they could do that, or, you know, we need to have an exactly equal distribution across all 5 quintiles of everybody from 18 to 80 years old. Whatever it is that you need, if you can't do it yourself, you can have somebody who does it all the time. And then lastly, I would also like to say that, you know, when we make personas, it's important to make sure that someone in your persona has like a disability. Just build it in, and not only disability, but also consider limited states that all people could be in, whether you have a disability or not. There may be temporarily you're carrying groceries, or you're in a noisy environment, or you're sick, or whatever. And if you build those into the personas, that will help you with the design work as a team.
Great point, Adam. Definitely touching on accessibility, which is really critical. So, all right, Amanda, thoughts on diversity?
So I already started to mention this. I think one of the hardest things for teams even teams with the best intentions who want to hire diversely, the real truth is that most people hire based on other people that they know or recommendations that they have. And so while it's absolutely great to build relationships, sometimes what that also means is it's really easy to just hire people that you already know. Or that are already in your circle of people. And so I've seen a couple of groups recently do a really good job of really actively looking for new ways to source candidates. And actually, this is true for recruiting participants as well as recruiting, like candidates for jobs and candidates for, like research participants. But looking outside of the normal channels that you have, specifically calling out, groups that are focused on, like there's a Black designers Twitter, there's different hashtags you can use on LinkedIn. There are different like varying levels of ability groups that you can reach out to, and making sure that you're not just passively saying, okay, we're going to see what comes to us, but really actively making changes about how you look for people, and taking on that onus of it's on me to make sure that I'm surrounded by different perspectives, and it's on me to make sure that I am getting different people included, and even just really basic things like if you're hiring, removing the names and the ages from the resumes, really super basic stuff. But there's lots of research that shows that it does make a difference. And sometimes you overlook people who could have really great perspective that will really open your ideas, open your eyes to ideas that you wouldn't have thought of before. And so I also like to remind people that diversity is not a chore. It's a benefit, right? Like you'll do better if you have a diverse set of people, and diversity also looks different ways. Like absolutely, ethnicity is important, nationality is important, ability or lack of ability is important. There's lots of different ways that you can think about and that you should be thinking about diversity. And I also like to remind people like it's in your best benefit to have a wide range of perceptions, but there's also more than one sort of access to look along diversity for. So making sure that you're really actively looking at different things and really being really honest with yourself about what you've done before, and being willing to make those changes. Sometimes it's really hard, but it's really worth it, and it'll really benefit you ultimately. So I like to kind of remind people that you're not doing this to check off a box or to make yourself feel better. Like it's really truly for your benefit. As well as to Adam's earlier point, like design the world you want to live in. If you want to live in a place where everybody is equal, then you got to act that way too. So I remove myself from the soapbox, but I get really excited about this kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your thoughts, Amanda, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, there's plenty of research and studies out there that show that, diversity of thought, diversity and inclusion in terms of, different people across all spectrums and working on different projects makes for a better outcome. Right. So there's plenty of information. McKinsey publishes a ton of information on this. So for those that are interested. All right, Kim, what are your thoughts on diversity?
Well, yeah, and Amanda, I'm nodding furiously at everything you've just said there, and it made me just note a couple of things down actually, that thinking about particularly when hiring, making sure the people that are doing the hiring have had some training in how to hire because a lot of people could be thrown into it, right? And suddenly they're a manager, suddenly they're hiring. So I think there's lots of courses out there like unconscious bias, right? So thinking, we may not even be consciously making these decisions. So I think that would, for me, is like if I could just mandate that across the board everywhere, I would, and I'm not I know that seems a bit full on, but it's one of those things, you know, if you're going to hire people, you need to have some kind of, you know, get the basics and be really kind of open with yourself about where those unconscious biases might sit, might lie. And the second thing as well is thinking about diversity of types of experience. So not always going for people that have gone and done a master's or a degree at a certain college for 3 years, but actually thinking, you know, there are many more ways now that people are getting their design experience, design credentials, and skill set. And I think we need to be much more open to those kind of different backgrounds of training as well, rather than just everyone having the same, because that also then suggests it's a certain type of person, right, as well. So those are my two things. And I think with regards to generally kind of diversity of thought within a team, I think getting to know each other and understanding each other's different personalities and behaviors and understanding where we're different. And I'm talking here specifically actually about a personality point of view, because it's really fascinating when you get together and you go, oh yeah, I'm like that too, but oh, I know I hate it when people talk to me like that, or you know, well, not so much these days in COVID times, but you know, some people don't like being people coming up to them at their desk because they're busy working, and then therefore they might be a bit abrupt, but they don't mean it. It's just that was quite you know, a bit too intense for them, but other people love it. So really understanding different personalities is so important within a team. So again, coming back to the first question, which is how do you grow and how do you make the most of the team you've got? Well, you need to understand everyone's differences, don't you? Those would be my 3 things.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. No, I think great points. And I loved your point too about the training piece, which is so critical, especially if you're hiring. So great points. Shamala, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I love all the points. You know, I kind of echo with all the points, because personally I've seen, you know, these kind of things being implemented by companies. Like Ford, we have a specific training on unconscious bias. You know, every employee has to go through that, because unknowingly we do that, you know, like we would just have bias and we may not know about those things. And then also, you know, like not many people understand inclusive or diversity kind of thing. So you know, like having trainings about that as well, like, you know, what is inclusivity? You know, when we talk about diversity, what does that mean? So diversity is not only, you know, like gender, right? It's also demographics, it's also religion, it's also, you know, you can have personal choices or orientations, and all of those things are part of, you know, being diverse. In addition to that, I also like, you know, Adam's point on when you're designing, you know, when you're designing, you have to think about not just normal personas, but also think about, you know, people with different abilities, disabilities, situations, and all of those things. That is another way of doing, you know, diverse designs. One more thing, what I have seen has helped is when you're hiring, you know, you can also hire people who have any kind of disabilities. If you have people from, you know, like any kind of background, it helps, right? For example, if you come from a certain region or demographic, that gives a different kind of thought process to your design. But also bringing in people who have some kind of disabilities in your design team will help tremendously, because they are always vouching for people, you know, who you are not thinking about in your designs. So I definitely feel it kind of helps a lot. I've personally seen, you know, like here we, you know, do have designers who have you know, different kind of disabilities, and how thought process changes, because you're not only thinking about happy cases, you're not only thinking about, you know, just a typical persona of your product, but thinking about every person, every situation.
Definitely. I totally agree, Shamala. Well said. Well said. All right. Well, I think that's all that we have time for today. Thank you all for joining us today. I'd like to thank our guests. And for more information about additional sessions at LEAP 2020 or any of the show notes on this session, feel free to visit www.mahdlo.net. And also don't forget to pick up a copy of Allison Holzer's book, Dare to Inspire, where she talks about all of the 18 engines of inspiration across all of the different areas that we're discussing today. Thank you so much, and we appreciate it. We'll see you next time.